My name is Ava Mitchell, and I'm 33 years old. For most people in my family, I've always been invisible, except when they needed something done. While my younger sister Chloe was treated like a rising star, I was treated like the help. The maid. The one who cooked, cleaned, and kept the machine of the Mitchell household running quietly in the background. But here's the part no one in my family knows. For the past 5 years, I've been building a multi-million-dollar events company in Seattle, running 3 offices and leading 60 employees. And in less than a week, I was about to sign the single largest contract of my career, worth over $3 million, with one of the most exclusive resort chains in the country. The irony? The CEO I was about to meet, the woman whose signature would change everything, was also scheduled to attend my mother's holiday fundraiser in San Francisco. The same fundraiser where my mother had demanded that I cook for 30 of Chloe's VIP friends. And my mother had no idea that the unemployed daughter who's good in the kitchen was the very same CEO that Fortune 500 executives had been trying to work with for years. If you think that sounds like the setup for a family disaster, you're right. But the secrets that unraveled in the next 48 hours didn't just expose the cracks in my family. They detonated everything they thought they knew about me. So let me take you back to where it started, the phone call that reminded me exactly what role my parents had cast me in, and why I was finally ready to walk away from it forever. Every holiday season at my parents' home in Palo Alto, California, looked the same. The Mitchell house gleamed with fairy lights, expensive garlands, and custom floral arrangements. Guests were ushered into the living room, glasses of champagne in hand. Chloe, my younger sister, 5 years my junior, was always at the center of attention, laughing in designer dresses, introducing herself as a PR powerhouse out of LA. She was the golden child, the investment, the future. And me? I was in the kitchen, elbow deep in pots and pans, managing the turkey, the side dishes, the desserts. Every single year since I was 17. It didn't matter what else was happening in my life. When Thanksgiving rolled around, it was understood, Ava will cook. When Christmas arrived, it was expected, Ava will handle the catering. Easter brunch, birthday parties, charity luncheons, Ava will make it work. Never mind that I had my own apartment in Seattle. Never mind that I had a career they didn't bother to ask about. In their eyes, my presence at any gathering was defined by utility. Chloe dazzled. I served. The humiliations stacked up like unpaid bills. At Chloe's engagement party, with 200 people at a country club, I spent 14 hours prepping hors d'oeuvres while she floated around in a gown our parents had bought her. When one of the guests asked my mother what I did for a living, she didn't hesitate to laugh lightly and say, "Oh, Ava doesn't really have Chloe's social skills. But she's wonderful in the kitchen." That stung more than I admitted at the time. Because the truth was, I did have a career. A thriving one. But they never asked. They didn't want to know. My father, polite but distant, once introduced me to a colleague as between opportunities, even though that very morning I'd closed a $500,000 deal. To them, my work didn't exist. My success didn't exist. The only role I was allowed to play was that of the family servant. The clearest proof came last summer when I stopped by the Palo Alto house. My childhood bedroom had been stripped bare, turned into storage for Chloe's overflow wardrobe. My trophies, books, and childhood photos were boxed up in the basement. Chloe, meanwhile, had been given an entire renovated third floor, home office, walk-in closet, and a private study. The message was crystal clear: one daughter was an investment, the other disposable. For 15 years, I swallowed it. For 15 years, I convinced myself that maybe one day they'd notice me for who I really was. That maybe one day they'd ask what I did, how I lived, who I'd become. But they never did. They were comfortable with their story: Chloe, the success. Ava, the helper. And then came the phone call. A call that would force me to decide whether I would keep playing the family maid, or finally choose myself. That phone call, the one I mentioned at the end of part 1, came on a gray December afternoon. I was standing in my Seattle apartment, suitcase open on the bed, carefully folding a blazer into place for a flight the next morning. The caller ID flashed across my phone screen, Mom. And even before I answered, I knew this wouldn't be a conversation, it would be an assignment. Ava, my mother's clipped voice rang out the moment I picked up. No hello, no how are you. Just command. Cancel whatever plans you've made for this weekend. We need you in Palo Alto tomorrow. I closed my eyes, steadying my breathing. What's happening tomorrow? I asked, even though I already suspected the answer. Your sister is hosting the rooftop New Year preview at the penthouse in Soma, she said, her tone like it was the most obvious thing in the world. 30 guests. Very important people. Venture capitalists. Media producers. Even Natalie Brooks, CEO of Revel Resorts, will be there. It's crucial for Chloe's career, and we can't afford for anything to go wrong. You'll arrive by noon and start cooking. 7 main courses, 10 sides, dessert, and wine pairings. The menu is already planned. Her words hit me like cold water. My fingers tightened on the edge of my suitcase. I wanted to laugh, because on my laptop screen, open just a few feet away, was an email from that same Natalie Brooks. Not an invitation to some family party. Not as Chloe's networking prospect. But a direct, personal confirmation that she wanted to meet me, the CEO of Nova Experiences, in Las Vegas 2 days later to finalize a $3.2 million contract. Can you imagine the irony? The woman my family thought I should cook for, the woman my mother saw as Chloe's golden opportunity, was about to sign the deal that would propel my company into national expansion. Mom, I have a flight, I said carefully. I can't just cancel everything too. She cut me off. Stop being difficult, Ava. Family comes first. Chloe is building connections that benefit all of us. You should be grateful to play your part. Grateful. That word burned. For 15 years, I had been grateful to scrub their kitchen, grateful to stay invisible, grateful to let my dreams shrink so Chloe's could expand. Mom, I said slowly, I have an important business trip. I'm flying out tomorrow night. There was silence, then laughter, sharp, dismissive laughter. Ava, don't exaggerate. What business? You don't have a real job. Don't start with your little hobbies again. Chloe's event matters. Be at the penthouse by noon. That's final. Her certainty was like a punch to the chest. In her mind, I was still a failure. Still unemployed. Still the spare daughter with good kitchen skills. She had no idea that I was leading 60 employees, negotiating multi-million-dollar deals, and being scouted for Forbes 40 Under 40 cover story. I looked at the flight confirmation on my desk, Seattle to Las Vegas, 9 a.m., December 31st. Business class. Paid for by my company. I had built everything from nothing, and now she wanted me to throw it all away to serve canapés at Chloe's party. Here's where I want to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have canceled the trip to keep peace in the family, just to avoid the storm? Or would you have chosen yourself, even if it meant walking away from your parents' approval forever? Comment below, because I know I'm not the only one who's been forced into that kind of impossible choice. Back to the call. Mom, I can't do it, I said firmly. Her voice went cold. Excuse me? I have responsibilities. I'm not coming to cook. You're being selfish, she snapped. Chloe can't afford to hire a catering team on New Year's Eve. Do you even know how expensive that would be? You owe us this. I nearly laughed at the irony. My mother lecturing me about catering costs when I owned a catering and events company. She had no idea. None. I don't owe you my career, I replied. Her voice rose into a shriek. If you leave us stranded like this, don't bother coming back. Do you hear me? If you walk away now, you're dead to this family. It wasn't the first time she'd threatened me with exile. Normally, those words had the power to break me. To pull me back into my place. But not this time. I took a deep breath. Then I guess this is goodbye. And I hung up. For a moment, the silence in my apartment was deafening. My heart pounded, but my hands, finally, weren't shaking. Instead of fear, what I felt was freedom. Of course, within minutes, the barrage began. Chloe's texts lit up my phone. What did you just say to Mom? Are you out of your mind? You're going to ruin everything. Natalie Brooks will be there. You'll embarrass us if you don't show up. Embarrass them? That was rich. My company had already managed several high-profile events for corporate clients, including Revel Resorts itself. I had personally overseen logistics for their West Coast retreats. Natalie Brooks had already praised our work, though she'd never met me face to face. That meeting was scheduled for 2 days later, in Las Vegas, with the contract waiting for signature. And yet here was my sister, terrified that my absence would embarrass her. I could have screamed. But instead, I laughed. For the first time in years, I laughed. Do you know that feeling when you realize the chains are off? When you finally stop asking for permission to live your own life? That was me, standing in my living room with Chloe's desperate texts flashing across the screen. I texted back one sentence, hire a caterer. I'm not coming. Her reply was instant, furious, on New Year's Eve? Are you insane? No one's available. You're destroying Mom. You're destroying me. I put my phone down. Because for once, their crisis wasn't mine to solve. Instead, I turned back to my suitcase, zipped it shut, and whispered to myself, this time, I choose me. It was such a small act, choosing my flight over their party, but it was also the boldest decision of my life. Because it wasn't just about the party. It was about 15 years of being treated like a servant. 15 years of being invisible until they needed something. 15 years of swallowing my voice. And now, finally, I was done. But here's the twist, I thought walking away would be the end of the story. That I'd quietly go to Vegas, sign the deal, and move on. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that my decision would collide head-on with my family's carefully curated image. That their glamorous networking night would implode spectacularly. And that the woman they expected me to serve in silence would be the very same woman to call me boss. Want to hear exactly how that disaster unfolded, and how my family's world unraveled in front of 30 horrified guests? Stay tuned for the next part. And if this story resonates with you, if you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own family, hit that subscribe button. Not just to support me, but to join a community of people who refuse to keep playing small. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to choose yourself, even if it means losing the people who should have loved you first. When I closed my phone and zipped my suitcase, I thought the hardest part was behind me. I thought choosing my flight over my family's demands was the true act of rebellion, the line in the sand I'd never dared to draw before. But what I didn't know was that the real storm was still waiting to break, not in my apartment in Seattle, but 500 miles south, on the glittering rooftop of a San Francisco penthouse. That's where the lies my parents had built around me finally collapsed, in front of 30 of the most important people in Chloe's life. And the sound of that collapse? It was louder than any firework you'll ever hear on New Year's Eve. The penthouse was dressed like a magazine spread that night, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Bay Bridge, string lights glimmering above the rooftop garden, champagne flutes lined in perfect symmetry on mirrored trays. Chloe had promised her guests an unforgettable evening, an elegant feast that would cement her reputation as the PR darling of her circle. My mother had bragged to anyone who would listen that her eldest daughter would be handling the food, because Ava's only good in the kitchen, at least she's useful there. I wasn't there to hear her say it, but I didn't have to be, I'd heard those exact words for 15 years. But what none of them bothered to plan for was this: When you strip away the servant you've relied on, you better have a backup. And my family didn't. By 6 p.m., guests were already arriving. Investors in designer suits, entertainment producers with their entourages, socialites dressed like walking Instagram ads. The air was full of polite laughter and the clinking of glasses. But the kitchen? Silent. Empty. Not a single aroma of roasting meat or simmering sauce. Nothing but stainless steel counters and a refrigerator full of bare essentials, milk, lettuce, a carton of eggs. My mother's perfect facade was seconds from crumbling, and she knew it. Picture it, Evelyn Mitchell, always the flawless hostess, darting from counter to counter, panic painted across her face, whisper shouting at Chloe, "Where's the food? Where's Ava?" Chloe, in a sequined jumpsuit, heels clicking on marble tile, texting furiously with shaking hands, "She's not coming, Mom. She's serious this time." And my father, silent as always, nursing a whiskey in the corner while trying not to watch his empire of appearances disintegrate. Have you ever seen someone realize too late that the one person they took for granted was the only person holding everything together? That was my mother that night. And the cruelest part? I'd left her with options. I had scribbled down the numbers of 3 emergency catering services before heading to the airport. But she hadn't bothered to check, hadn't thought it necessary, because in her mind, Ava always caves. Ava always shows up. Except this time, Ava didn't. By 7 p.m., the panic reached a fever pitch. Guests began whispering, "Isn't there supposed to be a dinner? I thought this was a gourmet event. Why do I smell nothing cooking?" Chloe attempted to salvage the evening, circulating the room with her PR smile glued in place, promising that the food is on its way, just a slight delay. But behind her eyes, terror burned. Because in less than 30 minutes, the guest of honor was arriving, Natalie Brooks, CEO of Revel Resorts, the very same woman who was scheduled to meet me in Las Vegas in less than 48 hours. Can you imagine the suspense? Natalie, one of the sharpest women in hospitality, expecting a fine dining experience, and instead walking into a disaster zone. At exactly 7:23 p.m., Chloe sent me a text that popped up on my screen while I was waiting at my gate in Seattle. "We're ordering pizza. Do you realize what you've done?" Yes. Yes, I did. By 7:45, the rooftop looked like a surreal comedy sketch. Guests in $1,000 outfits perched on velvet sofas, holding paper plates stacked with Papa John's slices. Some tried to laugh it off, others looked horrified. My mother, red-faced and trembling, placed pizza boxes onto monogrammed Wedgwood platters, trying desperately to preserve some illusion of class. My father avoided eye contact with everyone. And Chloe, oh, Chloe, she still tried to pitch PR services while balancing Domino's breadsticks on a tray. Can you picture that? A PR queen trying to sell her brand while her guests chewed greasy crusts under fairy lights? And then came the worst moment of all. Natalie Brooks arrived. She swept into the room in a midnight blue gown, her presence commanding attention instantly. She scanned the scene, eyes landing on the mismatched pizza boxes, the frantic hostess, the guests shifting uncomfortably. And then, like a hawk, her gaze sharpened. "What happened here?" she asked quietly, but her words carried across the rooftop like a gunshot. My mother rushed forward, voice trembling with desperation. "Oh, this is all my eldest daughter's fault. She abandoned us at the last minute. She's unreliable, unstable, she never holds a real job. Unreliable. Unstable. No real job. Do you hear the cruelty in those words? They cut through that rooftop like glass. And the guests listened, wide-eyed, some biting back smirks, others exchanging looks of disbelief. Because it wasn't just a party falling apart, it was a family exposing its ugliest truths in public. Here's where I want to pause and ask you, if you were a guest at that rooftop party, what would you have thought? Would you have felt pity for Chloe and my mother, scrambling to serve pizza? Or would you have felt second-hand embarrassment, realizing you'd been lured to a high-end networking event that turned into a cheap punchline. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I've seen both reactions when I tell this part of the story. Natalie stayed only 20 minutes. She took one look at the chaos, endured half a slice of lukewarm pepperoni, and left without a word. For Chloe, it was a professional death sentence. For my mother, it was social suicide. And for me, waiting at my gate, boarding pass in hand, it was vindication. Not revenge, not satisfaction, but a deep, quiet confirmation that I had made the right choice. The texts poured in all night. You ruined everything. Mom says you're dead to her. Natalie looked disgusted. Everyone left early. You've destroyed this family. And do you know what I felt reading those messages? Peace. Because for the first time in 15 years, their chaos wasn't my cage. Their emergencies weren't my priorities. Their judgments weren't my reality. The rooftop disaster became gossip legend in the Bay Area's social circles. The story of Evelyn Mitchell, who bragged about her perfect entertaining, serving Papa John's on fine china, spread faster than wildfire. Chloe's clients pulled back. My mother's charity friends whispered behind her back. And my father, well, my father finally had to look in the mirror and see the cost of his silence. Meanwhile, I boarded my flight to Las Vegas. As the plane lifted off, I leaned back in my seat, exhaled, and smiled. Because in less than 48 hours, I would be shaking hands with the very woman my mother had tried to impress, and this time, she would be calling me boss. But the story doesn't end with pizza boxes and humiliation. What happened next in that Las Vegas boardroom, when the truth about who I really was came crashing into the viral fallout of that rooftop disaster, that was the moment everything changed forever. That was the moment my family's lies met my reality. And trust me, you won't want to miss how that played out. So tell me, have you ever watched someone's carefully crafted image implode right in front of you? Have you ever seen the mask slip and the truth come spilling out in the most public, embarrassing way possible? Share your story in the comments, because I promise, this community knows how powerful it feels when truth finally breaks through the lies. And if you're finding value in this story, if you've ever been the invisible one, the underestimated one, the one written off until the day you proved them wrong, make sure you hit subscribe. Not just for me, but because these are the stories that remind us all, sometimes the only way to reclaim your power is to walk away, let the disaster unfold, and trust that the truth will take care of the rest. When my plane touched down in Las Vegas, I carried more than just a suitcase and a portfolio of contracts. I carried the weight of years of invisibility and the strange calm of knowing I'd finally broken free. I thought I'd left the rooftop disaster behind in San Francisco, tucked away like a scandalous family secret. But the universe has a way of tying knots tighter than we expect, and that night of humiliation was already circling back to collide with me in the most spectacular way. The next morning, I stood in the shimmering lobby of Revel Resorts, glass walls pouring sunlight onto marble floors that gleamed like they'd been polished by angels. My team was already waiting upstairs, nervously adjusting ties and reviewing last-minute notes. This was it, the pre-meeting dinner with Natalie Brooks, CEO of Revel Resorts, the woman whose signature would open a door worth $3.2 million and, more importantly, put Nova Experiences on the national map. When Natalie walked into the room, she radiated the kind of presence that makes people straighten their backs without realizing it. She smiled warmly, shook my hand, and said, "I've been waiting to meet you in person, Ava. Your company's reputation speaks for itself." My heart raced, but not with nerves, this was validation. Finally, someone who saw me for what I really was. The dinner began smoothly. I presented our proposal: tailored VIP experiences, scalable logistics, immersive design packages. My team showcased success stories from Seattle, Miami, and Los Angeles. Heads nodded. Pens scratched across paper. Everything was flowing perfectly. Until Natalie's assistant walked in, carrying an iPad, her face pale with hesitation. "MS. Brooks, I think you should see this, she whispered, handing it over. Natalie glanced down, and I watched her expression shift, curiosity, then confusion, then something close to disbelief. Slowly, she turned the iPad toward me. My breath caught in my throat. There it was, a photo posted to LinkedIn, already going viral. The rooftop disaster. Pizza boxes stacked on fine china. My mother's flushed face. Chloe's forced smile. And in the background, framed on the wall, a family portrait, the Mitchells at Thanksgiving. And there I was, half hidden, slightly blurred, standing on the edge of the frame like an afterthought. The room fell silent. Everyone looked from the photo to me, then back again. Natalie's eyes narrowed. This photo was taken in Palo Alto, wasn't it? At the Mitchell house. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the edges of recognition. I swallowed hard. Yes. That's my family's home. Her gaze locked on mine. So Margaret Mitchell, the woman who hosted that pizza fiasco last night, she's your mother? Yes. A murmur rippled through the boardroom. My legal counsel lowered his pen, my operations manager shifted in his chair, and my head chef's eyes widened in shock. For a moment, all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. Natalie leaned back, studying me. Your mother spent the evening telling everyone that her eldest daughter was unstable, unreliable, unemployable. That she abandoned them. And you're telling me that daughter is you? Yes. My voice didn't shake. She doesn't know what I do. She's never asked. The silence stretched. Then Natalie let out a laugh, not cruel, but astonished. My God. She told me last night that her daughter usually just cooks for them because she can't hold a real job. And here you are, the CEO I've been chasing for 2 years. The tension snapped like a bowstring. Laughter spread across the table, incredulous, almost disbelieving. My operations manager shook his head, whispering, unreal. Natalie tapped her phone, pulling up Google. Within seconds, the screen filled with articles. My hospitality quarterly feature, the Inc. interview, the James Beard Award nomination. She tilted the phone toward her team. This is the woman Margaret Mitchell called unemployable. And as if on cue, the assistant rushed back in. Ms. Brooks, Forbes just announced tomorrow's cover story for 40 Under 40. She projected it onto the boardroom screen. And there I was, my professional headshot, the headline blazing. From invisible to invaluable, how Ava Mitchell built Nova experiences without family money. The room went still again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't silence of doubt, it was awe. Natalie turned to me, eyes gleaming. Your family has no idea, do they? That you run one of the fastest growing event companies in the country. That you employ 60 people. That you're about to sign this contract. I shook my head. They think I'm unemployed. They've never asked about my work. To them, I'm just the family maid. For a long moment, Natalie just stared at me, then broke into a wide grin. Well, Ms. Mitchell, I think it's time we give them a wake-up call. She stood, stepping outside the glass walls of the boardroom to make a phone call. We could see her pacing, gesturing, her voice sharp and animated. When she returned, she was smiling like someone who'd just delivered a knockout punch. I just spoke to your mother, she said, her tone almost playful. My stomach dropped. I told her I was very disappointed in last night's event and would be taking my business elsewhere. She begged me to reconsider. Blamed everything on her eldest daughter. So I told her the truth, that I had, in fact, just signed a multi-million-dollar deal with the most talented entrepreneur I know. Her daughter, Ava Mitchell. The room erupted. My CFO let out a low whistle. My team applauded. And me? I sat frozen, heart pounding, torn between horror at the thought of my mother's reaction and exhilaration at the justice of it all. Within minutes, my phone lit up on the table. 47 missed calls. Dozens of texts. My father. Chloe. My mother. Desperate messages flashing one after another. Is this true? What the hell is Nova Experiences? How could you humiliate us like this? This is cruel, Ava. Stop pretending. Answer your phone. I ignored them. Because for once, my reality was louder than their narrative. Natalie raised her glass of sparkling water. Ms. Mitchell, let's finalize this contract. I believe we have a partnership to celebrate. I signed my name, and in that moment, it was as if every invisible scar from the past 15 years faded just a little. Every insult, every dismissal, every time I'd been introduced as the one between jobs burned away under the weight of a $3.2 million signature. But here's the thing, the deal was just business. The real victory was the truth finally crashing into daylight. My family could no longer hide behind their story of me as the invisible, failing daughter. The world now saw me as I was, a CEO, a builder, a woman who had refused to stay small. And yet, as champagne flutes clinked around me, I couldn't help but wonder, what would my mother say now, stripped of her illusions? What excuse would Chloe invent, now that her golden image had cracked in front of everyone? What happens to people who build their identity on diminishing others, when the person they dismissed stands taller than they ever imagined? So let me ask you, if you were in my place, sitting in that boardroom with a signed contract in hand and your phone buzzing with desperate messages from the very people who had written you off, what would you have done? Would you have answered the call? Or would you have let them sit in the silence of their own lies? Comment below, I want to know. Because sometimes the silence is louder than any answer. When I signed that contract in Las Vegas, I thought the story was finished. I thought the boardroom celebration was the final chapter, the ribbon tied neatly on a long, bitter history. But the truth is, that signature was only the beginning. Because the moment my pen left the page, the consequences began rippling outward, like stones dropped into water, each circle spreading wider, touching every corner of my family's carefully built world. And if the rooftop disaster had cracked their image, what came next shattered it into pieces too sharp to ever glue back together. It started with Natalie Brooks's LinkedIn post. Within minutes of signing, she snapped a photo of me with the Revel Resorts executive team, champagne glasses raised high. Her caption read, "Thrilled to announce our partnership with Nova Experiences and its brilliant CEO, Ava Mitchell. Excited for the future of luxury events together." She tagged the company, she tagged me, and, most devastatingly, she tagged my mother. That one post detonated in Silicon Valley social circles like a bomb. Comments rolled in from industry leaders, congratulating me, praising the deal, sharing their own stories of working with Nova. Former clients chimed in, confirming the quality of our services. And in between all that noise, the silence from my family stood out like a black hole. By the time I woke up the next morning, the fallout had already begun. Chloe's biggest client, a Bay Area venture capital firm, emailed her, citing concerns about professionalism, and suspended their contract. Another followed within hours. Her PR firm, which she'd flaunted as unstoppable, began to bleed clients like a sinking ship. I didn't have to guess why. I'd seen the screenshots forwarded to me from acquaintances at the country club, people whispering, if she can't even manage her own family's event without turning it into a pizza fiasco, how can she manage our brand? My mother, once the self-appointed queen of every charity gala in Palo Alto, was suddenly uninvited from committees she'd lorded over for years. The official reason? Restructuring. But everyone knew the real reason. The whispers were cruel, the kind of cruelty that cuts deeper because it's dressed up as gossip. Did you hear Evelyn Mitchell had to serve Papa John's on her fine china? And her eldest daughter, the one she called a failure, is on the cover of Forbes this week. The humiliation spread like wildfire. And my father? He faced his own reckoning. His golf buddies, the men he'd spent years bragging to about Chloe's brilliance, turned their questions on him. How could you not know your daughter was a millionaire CEO? How could you not recognize what was happening right under your roof? I heard later that he stopped showing up to the club altogether. Too much laughter behind hands, too many sideways glances. Have you ever seen what happens when a family that lives for appearances loses control of their image? It's like watching a mansion collapse from the inside, the frame eaten away by termites no one wanted to admit were there. For years, my parents built their reputation on the narrative that Chloe was the jewel and I was the dead weight. But when that narrative broke in public, when the world saw me as valuable and them as blind, it wasn't just embarrassing. It was catastrophic. I didn't have to say a word. The world did it for me. Every congratulatory comment on Natalie's post was another nail in the coffin of their lies. Every share of the Forbes cover story, from invisible to invaluable, was another reminder that their invisibility cloak for me had failed. Every email Chloe lost, every charity board my mother was removed from, every awkward question my father couldn't answer, it all stemmed from a truth they had spent years refusing to acknowledge, that I was more than their maid. That I was never the failure they wanted me to be. Of course, the calls came. Endless calls. My father's voice, tight with shame, "Ava, your mother is hysterical. Please, just talk to her." Chloe's texts, a mix of rage and desperation, "Are you proud of yourself? You've destroyed me. You've destroyed Mom. Do you even care?" And my mother's voicemails, dripping with anger, then pleading, then tears, "How could you humiliate us like this? How could you make us look like fools? You should have told us. You should have warned us." But here's the thing, I did try to tell them. I tried for years. They never listened. They never asked. They never wanted to know who I was outside of the kitchen. And now, facing the consequences of their blindness, they wanted to pin it on me, as if my success was the sin, not their neglect. So let me ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have answered those calls, soothed their shame, carried the burden of their downfall? Or would you have let them sit in the reality they created, forced to face the reflection they could no longer avoid? Comment below, I want to hear, because I know some of you have been the scapegoat in your own families, the one everyone underestimated until the truth finally came out. The fallout didn't just change them, it changed me. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fix, to soften, to make excuses. For the first time, I understood that their downfall was not my responsibility. Their social collapse was the natural consequence of years spent diminishing me. And as cruel as it sounds, a part of me felt free. Free in a way I'd never felt before. Within a week, Nova Experiences had more inquiries than we could handle. New contracts rolled in, our waitlist doubled, and I hired 10 more employees to keep up. The Forbes article went viral, and interview requests poured into my inbox. And my family? They were forced to watch from the sidelines, powerless, as the daughter they had dismissed as useless became the name on everyone's lips. It's strange, isn't it? Success is the best revenge, but sometimes the revenge isn't even the point. Sometimes the real satisfaction comes from realizing you no longer need their approval. That the people who made you feel small can't touch the life you've built for yourself. That their world may collapse, but yours is only beginning. And that's where I'll leave you for now, with this question lingering. When the people who underestimated you finally face the fallout of their own blindness, do you reach down to lift them up? Or do you let them learn the lesson that was always theirs to carry? Success is strange. When you spend years being invisible, mocked, or underestimated, you imagine triumph will feel like fireworks, loud, explosive, undeniable. But when it finally comes, it's quieter, deeper, like a sunrise spreading over a horizon you thought you'd never see. That's how it felt in the months after the Las Vegas deal. The fallout had wrecked my family's reputation, but for me, it was the beginning of something bigger than I'd ever dared to dream. By spring, Nova Experiences was no longer just a regional event company. We had expanded into 5 cities: Seattle, Los Angeles, Miami, New York, and Chicago. I watched my employee roster grow from 60 to 120, each new hire a reminder that what I'd built was real, sustainable, powerful. At our new headquarters in Manhattan, a glass tower overlooking Central Park, I stood in front of a wall of windows one morning, coffee in hand, and thought, this view is mine. Not borrowed. Not gifted. Mine. Do you know that feeling? That moment when you realize the life you're living is one you built brick by brick, without shortcuts, without permission? It's addictive. It's empowering. And it's something no one, not even your family, can take away from you. The Forbes cover story had catapulted me into the spotlight. Invitations poured in, keynote speeches at the Cornell School of Hotel Administration, panels with Fortune 500 executives, even a call from Food Network asking if I'd consider a documentary about my journey. I laughed the first time my assistant read the title they pitched, Invisible to Invaluable, the Ava Mitchell story. It sounded surreal, almost like it was about someone else. But then I remembered all the nights I worked until sunrise, all the events I pulled off flawlessly while my family dismissed me as between jobs, and I realized, no, this was mine. Every second of it. One of the most emotional moments came when I hosted our company's annual retreat, this time not in a rented hotel ballroom but in a resort we had designed ourselves in partnership with Revel Resorts. My employees, who had once been a scrappy group of underdogs, now filled a massive hall, clapping and cheering as I walked on stage. Maria, my head chef turned executive director, whispered to me before I took the mic, "Look around, Ava. This is your family now." And she was right. These were the people who believed in me, who thrived because I gave them the chance my parents never gave me. I told them that day, we are not just an events company. We are proof that being overlooked doesn't mean being unworthy. Every time someone told us we weren't enough, we built something greater. And we'll keep building. The applause that followed shook me to my core. For once, I wasn't clapping for someone else's dream. They were clapping for mine. Meanwhile, the world of high society, the one my mother had worshipped, was buzzing with my name. The same country club where she once bragged about Chloe now whispered about me. The same charity boards that had dropped her now sent me invitations. And the sweetest irony? Chloe, humbled and desperate, sent me a formal PR proposal, hoping Nova Experiences would hire her firm. I told her to submit it through the same process as every other agency. No shortcuts. No family discounts. When I read her proposal, it was surprisingly good, focused, professional, stripped of arrogance. For the first time in years, Chloe seemed like someone who wanted to stand on her own instead of climbing on my back. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for her. But my parents? That was different. They requested a meeting 3 months after the Forbes cover. I agreed, but on my terms, a neutral restaurant in Manhattan, not their home turf. When they arrived, they looked smaller somehow. My mother's imperiousness had melted into something like shame. My father's shoulders sagged under years of silence. And Chloe, for once, didn't look smug, just tired. I laid down a single sheet of paper on the table. My terms. Equal respect. No more servant treatment. Public acknowledgement of my success. Genuine apologies. Therapy, family and individual. Non-negotiable. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she read. "Ava, we've lost everything," she whispered. "Our reputation. Chloe's clients. The charity boards. Please, we just want our daughter back." I looked her in the eye and said calmly, "Then meet me as an equal, not as your maid." Chloe surprised me. For the first time, she admitted her jealousy. "Mom made me feel special by making you small," she said softly. "I see how wrong that was. I've been in therapy. I'm trying to change." My father added, voice cracking, "I should have defended you. I knew more than I admitted." I let her narrative stand because it was easier than fighting. I'm ashamed. Their words didn't erase the years of pain. But they mattered. They were cracks in the wall they had built between us. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to shrink or forgive too quickly. I felt powerful enough to let them earn back their place in my life, or not. The triumph wasn't just business growth, or magazine covers, or million-dollar contracts. The real triumph was boundaries. Saying no when they demanded yes. Setting terms instead of accepting conditions. Refusing to dim my light so theirs could shine brighter. That was the victory. That was the freedom. Do you know the most symbolic moment of all? 6 months later, I hosted my first family dinner, not at their house, but in my Manhattan condo overlooking Central Park. It wasn't me cooking in the kitchen while they entertained. My Nova team catered the entire evening, servers in crisp uniforms delivering a flawless 5-course meal. And when they served me first, addressing me as Ms. Mitchell, CEO, the reversal wasn't lost on anyone. My parents sat quietly, Chloe bowed her head, and for the first time, I felt the balance shift. I wasn't the maid anymore. I was the boss. And as I raised my glass, I told them what I'd come to believe with every fiber of my being: success doesn't need permission. Self-worth doesn't require validation. And respect is non-negotiable. The room went silent. And in that silence, I realized something. I had finally won, not by humiliating them, not by seeking revenge, but by refusing to stay small. By choosing myself, again and again, until the world had no choice but to see me. So let me ask you, what does triumph look like for you? Is it money, recognition, freedom? Or is it simply the moment you stop asking for permission to be who you are? Comment below. I want to hear your version of victory. Because maybe your story, like mine, will remind someone else that it's never too late to step out of the shadows and into your own light. When I look back on the arc of my life, the girl in Palo Alto who was treated like a household servant, the woman who chose a plane ticket over another night of servitude, the CEO who signed a contract while her family scrambled to explain themselves, I see something more than just revenge or success. I see a blueprint. A map for anyone who has ever been dismissed, underestimated, or silenced into believing their worth depended on someone else's permission. Because here's the truth I learned: your value is not defined by the roles other people assign to you. My family decided I was the maid, the helper, the background character in Chloe's spotlight. And for a long time, I accepted that role not because it was true, but because it was easier than fighting. Have you ever done that? Shrunk yourself to keep the peace, dimmed your light so someone else could shine brighter? If you have, then you already know how heavy that mask becomes. The breaking point didn't come overnight. It came after years of being invisible, of hearing "at least she can cook" while contracts worth millions sat signed in my desk drawer. It came the night I chose a boarding pass over an apron. And it came again when I watched my family's perfect facade collapse under the weight of their own lies. But here's what mattered most: the moment I stopped waiting for them to see me, I finally saw myself. That's where the real shift began. Winning contracts, landing Forbes covers, opening offices in 5 cities, those were milestones, yes. But they were symptoms of something deeper: boundaries. The ability to say no. The courage to demand respect. The strength to walk away from roles that suffocate you. Do you know how freeing it is to realize you don't need anyone's permission to succeed? That the people who underestimated you are not the gatekeepers of your destiny? That realization was my triumph. And the legacy I'm building isn't just Nova experiences, though I'm proud of every employee, every event, every partnership. The legacy is this: I want every overlooked intern, every underestimated daughter, every background character in someone else's story to know they are allowed to write their own narrative. You don't have to stay small to keep others comfortable. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. When my parents sat across from me in that Manhattan restaurant, asking for a second chance, I realized something powerful. For years, I thought I wanted their apology, their approval, their recognition. But sitting there, watching my mother cry and my father admit his silence, I understood: I didn't need it anymore. The validation I had been chasing was already mine. It came from the employees who trusted me, the clients who respected me, the community that celebrated me. My parents' recognition was optional. My own recognition was essential. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all: success is not about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Today, when I speak at universities or leadership summits, I tell my story not for sympathy but for solidarity. Because I know I'm not alone. I know some of you watching right now have been called lazy or unreliable or not enough. Maybe by your family, maybe by your boss, maybe by society itself. And I want you to hear me clearly: their inability to see your worth does not erase it. Your light does not dim because they refuse to open their eyes. So let me ask you, what role have you been assigned that doesn't belong to you? What mask are you still wearing because someone else handed it to you? Drop it in the comments, because sometimes naming the lie is the first step to breaking it. And who knows? Maybe your words will help someone else finally take off theirs. As for me, I wake up every morning in my Manhattan apartment, look in the mirror, and remind myself, I am Ava Mitchell, CEO, founder, builder, not the family maid. Never again. I pour my coffee, step into my office, and know that every decision I make ripples outward, to my employees, my clients, and maybe, just maybe, to someone watching who needs permission to believe in themselves. But here's the secret I'll leave you with: you don't actually need permission. You never did. You only need the courage to take back the pen and start writing your own story. So I'll end with this: what will your story say?